Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey over here in Shanghai, China. Hundreds and hundreds of you viewers have sent me very concerned messages asking me what's going on here in the People's Republic of China with the coronavirus. Well, you probably heard there's a viral outbreak that started in the city of Wuhan and has spread out throughout China, throughout Asia, and even to the United States. And people are rightfully concerned because apparently it's deadly and people are getting sick and dying. So this outbreak has coincided with the Chinese New Year celebration. If you haven't been to China at this time of the year before, and this was your first visit to China, you would probably be a little confused. You might think that the streets were empty and this place looks like a ghost town. The city of Shanghai with 27 million people looks kind of like a ghost town this time of year, and you might think, oh, it's the virus, it's a zombie apocalypse. No, that's just Chinese New Year. Chinese cities tend, especially this one, especially the city of Shanghai, tends to shut down this time of year. A huge percentage of that 27 million Shanghainese population isn't actually Shanghainese. They come from other parts of China. And so during the Chinese New Year, there was this mass exodus from the city. And so the shops closed down, restaurants closed down, businesses closed down, sometimes for a week, sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes all the way through mid-February. And so, man, I remember when I first came here to China and I opened up my own gym here, that time of the year came around, and I thought, oh no, our business is failing. Nobody's showing up because I didn't understand the culture. And it was like 2 months where the gym was just empty, absolutely empty. And then people started trickling back and, ooh, man, learning how to navigate that aspect of the economy here was, man, that was a sobering lesson for a fledgling gym owner. So there were some memes floating around Instagram yesterday. I was looking at some of them. One was directed at Chinese UFC fighter Jung Whaley and kind of mean-spirited. Let's take a look at it right here. And Jung Whaley responded. And it's one thing if people laugh, but she wasn't laughing. She plainly said, look, people are dying. People are suffering. These are people's mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, children are dying. Let's not joke about this. If you want to say something about me to make yourself feel stronger, cool, do it. But don't laugh at the dead. So that's a sobering thought there. Meanwhile, here in China, the people of Shanghai are basically on citywide quarantine, the ones who are left behind during Chinese New Year, myself included. The Chinese New Year holiday has been extended, virtually doubled, if you will, in an attempt to wait out the incubation phase, which I believe is 2 weeks of this coronavirus. So essentially, people who want to come into the city have to pass checks. There are medical stations checking people coming in. So while the Shanghainese have been on extended vacation here in Shanghai, man, they've become extremely creative with the internet. Internet memes about this virus, funny ones people are actually laughing at, not mean-spirited ones, man. They are going off the hook here. people are bored, quite frankly, sitting at home thinking, man, what can we do? We can't go out. We can't go out to eat. Can't go out, to the club or whatever people do for fun during a vacation. So basically, we're all stuck at home getting cabin fever. Authorities have suggested that people wear a mask, like a medical mask, a breathing mask. And so if you walk outside, you'll see a lot of people wearing masks. But if you had walked down the streets of Shanghai or any other major city in China on any other day of the year, before this viral outbreak, if you will, you would have seen people wearing masks constantly, walking around looking like ninjas. That's the norm. One of the big reasons is the pollution in Shanghai. You know what is actually more deadly statistically than the coronavirus? Air pollution. And Shanghai, Beijing, these major metropolitan Chinese megacities are some of the most polluted places on planet Earth as far as air pollution goes. They've cleaned it up quite a lot in the last 10 years since I first got here, where you would look out in the sky and it would just kind of be this brown, yellow, dingy gray color instead of blue. But yeah, still not exactly like a walk in the woods. So people are getting bored. Let's take a look at some of these memes they're posting. Guy fishing in his own fish tank. I had this neighbor when I was a kid, a guy named Ricky, and he was mentally retarded. And he loved to fish. He absolutely loved to fish. He would go fishing with his dad on the weekends whenever he could. Just loved it. Loved to catch fish. And I remember on weekdays when his dad wasn't around to fish with him, he would put a bucket in his front yard and he would fish in that bucket. And I remember one day I went over to take a look at this bucket to see, like, is he just pretending? And there was an actual fish in there. So, anyway, childhood memories of my neighbor. Now, these viral videos over here in China might appear to be victims of a disease in its later stages, but it's actually people doing a discount lion dance, since, they're stuck inside and they can't get the traditional costume. Look up the lion dance, it's cool, man. Even my own kids decided to do their own lion dance. The streets of Shanghai, yeah, they're desolate, as is the norm during Chinese New Year. But at the same time, people are out there, they're skateboarding. Yeah, skateboarding's kind of a big thing in China. It's popular. A few Western sports became really popular here a decade ago. Basketball, skateboarding, to name two in particular. What else? They're walking their dogs, they're jogging. But yeah, people are worried, obviously. Now, American news media is very different when reporting this story than Chinese news media. One of the most important things that the Chinese government does as far as news media coverage is controlling it. And I know that sounds extremely un-American. That is extremely un-American, because Americans are screaming, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Listen, have you ever seen 1 million people all at once? The first time I saw 1 million people all at once, I was in Buenos Aires. I went up into this high-rise building, and I looked down at, what's it called? La Calle 9 de Julio? I think that's the one. It's really, really big. And I saw this massive crowd. This massive crowd gathered around. The most people I had ever seen in a single place at a single time. I grew up in a small farming town with like 1,000 people. And I saw this massive, uncountable number of people, and it wasn't even 1 million. And that flock of people blew my mind. Then I came here to China. And I got on the metro, the subway, for the first time. And that blew the Calle 9 de Julio out of the water as far as sheer volume of numbers. And then, man, there was this New Year celebration, not Chinese New Year, January 1st New Year. Got to understand those are two different events, two different dates, two different holidays. But the January 1st New Year, I was downtown in Shanghai, just passing through. And there's a street in Shanghai called Nanjing Road. It's a pedestrian road. And Nanjing Road is always pretty packed. But at midnight, on New Year's Eve, well, right before the stroke of midnight, it was 1 million people all in one spot at the same time. You ever seen that movie World War Z about the zombies, but they're fast zombies that climb on top of each other to scale over walls? And that's what it looked like trying to get into the metro station, trying to go down to the subway. People were literally climbing over each other. 1 million people all at once. And I'm packed up against the wall, and I feel the crowd pressing an inch to the left where I am, and I'm getting crushed to death. And I managed to get out of there. But I remember listening to the news later that evening. And right where I was, right up against that same wall, there were about 12 people who actually were crushed to death, simply because of the sheer volume of the numbers, because of people in those quantities panic just a little bit. People die. Why am I telling you this story in relation to news media coverage? American news media, in my opinion, incites negative things in the population, not the least of which is panic. So, I've been listening to a little bit of what Americans are saying, and the first thing I heard, there was this YouTuber, what was his name? I don't remember, but he's having this chat with a guy in Hong Kong to get the real story, because apparently people don't understand the difference between Hong Kong and mainland China. Two very different geographical entities, especially considering the virus was way over here and not over there at the time. But man, these guys were fear-mongering big time. Big time. Like, it's pandemonium. People are running around like zombies in the streets. There are dead bodies all over, millions of them. That's clearly not the case. Yeah, people are dying, not in those numbers. It's not World War Z, if you will. It's not New Year's Eve. But it is Chinese New Year. But man, when you have a population this big, 1.3 billion people, and it's one thing to say that number, because we've heard big numbers all of our lives. We've heard them, but we haven't necessarily seen them. If you're from the United States, the U.S. has a few big cities with millions of people. A few. China has a lot of big cities with millions of people. It's funny because Chinese people will often say, I come from a small town, and then you find out their town has 1 million people. And that's small because it doesn't have 10 million or 20 million or 27 million. Shanghai, where I live, is the most populated city in the world's most populated country. Population density is thick here. And so when you have a contagious disease, that's a big deal. And that needs to be dealt with surgically. And if you incite panic, what happens with a population this dense and this big? It gets out of hand quick. So if you use scare tactics on the news, what happens? People start fleeing, they start spreading out, and the disease goes with them. Let's talk about school shootings for just a minute. It seems like every few months there's a major school shooting in the United States. And it's tragic, it always is. And then the news media blows it up into this massive fear-mongering event. Why? To get views. To make money. to make money from your fear. That's what fear-mongering is. It is making money from your fear, just like fish-mongering is making money from selling fish. War-mongering, making money off of warfare. The fear-mongering industry, it's been going on for a while. And they're not showing any signs of stopping, but what does the American news media do? They make these bastards famous. These people who go into schools and kill children, they make them famous. No. Stop that now. Please. They do not deserve your time. They do not deserve your attention. They do not deserve your tears. A few years ago, there was not a shooting because it's illegal to own or acquire a firearm in the People's Republic of China, but there was this crazy guy who got this crazy idea that he would get a knife and he would go into a school and he would kill children. And he did. He did just that. He went into the school with a knife and he killed a bunch of people, a bunch of innocent children, and the teachers trying to save them. When the authorities caught this man, they reported it on the news. They told the public exactly what happened. This crazy guy went into the school, he hurt people, we stopped him, we solved the problem, we executed him. The end. That's his story. That's all he gets. How many copycat incidents did we get? 0. How often does that happen in China? Not too often. Why? Because one thing the government does really, really well here is they do a great job at controlling the narrative, which I know sounds very terribly un-American, to reduce fear-mongering. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah, you can type in the comments, that's communist. Yeah, sure, it's a communist country. And communism has its problems, some major, major problems, man. We think that we communicate with information. We think we communicate with data. And we could give you the data. You could say, this many people are infected, this many people have died. Just like I can tell you that the People's Republic of China has a population of 1.3 billion people. And we think, okay, we understand that. But unless you've seen that massive crowd of 1 million people all at once squishing you up against the wall when there's a tiny bit of panic, you don't really understand what that means. Because you don't have the context of the narrative. You don't have the story. We don't communicate with data. We don't communicate with information. That's a part of it. But that information and that data is carried through the conduit of narratives, of stories, down to the smallest particle of language. The smallest particle of language that has meaning. It's a morpheme, a part of a word. The Chinese language uses iconographic symbols. Thousands of them. A very simple one. Jia. It's a character. Let me see if I can get that up on the screen. Okay, there we go. It's made of 2 radicals. The one on top looks like a roof, because that's what it means. It means a roof, the roof of a home. Jia means home or family. And then that squiggly thing underneath represents a pig. That radical means a pig. So the character for home, jia, literally means a pig under a roof. If we divide it up into the smallest parts, there's a story there. In that one little word, that one little sound, jia, there's a story. What is that story? Old-timey houses, those old hutong-style houses, and some of these old courtyard-style houses, they had like an outer wall where they would have the rooms. And then inside of that, there would be an inner courtyard. And in the inner courtyard, there would be a pig. Because a proper old-timey Chinese home was like that. That had a pig inside. It wasn't really a home. It wasn't a proper family home unless it had a pig there under the roof. There's the story. And you can break down any word like that. Any word. Break it down into the smallest parts that have meaning, and you can find stories behind that. And it's fascinating. It's called etymology. If we look at some of the greatest teachers throughout history, read through the teachings of the Buddha. It's not blocks of text. It's not blocks of information. It's stories. When I picked up the book of the teachings of the Buddha for the first time, I thumbed through it, and I found this story about a man who was shipwrecked on an island. And his ship is broken, it's got a big hole in it, and so he wants to fix it. That is his pressing urge, his need, his want, his desire. To fix this boat, get off the island, get home. And so he sets out through the forest to find some wood, to get some sticks and some sticky pitch from the trees to mend his ship, to mend that hole so he can sail home. And now he has this new desire, this new quest, this new purpose in life to get those sticks and to get the pitch to fix the ship. And so he goes out and he finds some sticks and he's like, oh, this is a good stick. Oh, this is a good stick. And then he's having this interesting time finding all these fascinating sticks. The end. And Buddha doesn't give you a moral like him. This is the moral of the story. This is the interpretation of the story. He leaves it at that. Lets you stop and think. Okay. And we can discuss that for quite some time. We can talk about how the man wanted one thing. He wants to get off the island. He wants to fix the ship. He wants to pick up sticks. Buddhism is very much about analyzing what we think we want, what we really want, why we want that, do we really need to want, and so on. Forces us to ask some questions when we tell stories, and we stop and we think about them, and we give some pregnant pauses, which I know a lot of people on YouTube are not comfortable with because you're terrified of silence. You're afraid of silence because you're afraid of what is potentially being spoken in here and in here. You're potentially afraid of hearing your own voice. The most powerful voice in your life. The only voice that you will ever listen to. And the only voice that has the power to make changes in your life. Your own. That own little I am inside of you. The stories that we tell are extremely powerful. Stories and narratives are so much more powerful than simply giving the facts. We tend to think of truth as history and science. Nothing but just empirical data. We want the math. We want the numbers. So we tell ourselves, nah, we want the story. Look at the math. Look at the statistics. Statistically, we are so much more likely to die of heart disease. That's the #1 killer of humans. Stroke. Crossing the road and getting hit by a car. An automobile accident. A 100, 1,000 other reasons. This virus has affected a number of people, and that's tragic. It truly is. But as far as the entire Chinese population, it's a tiny, tiny fraction of a drop in the bucket. Not even a drop. Not to diminish the importance of those lives and those that cared about them, but as far as numbers and data and information goes, that's what data tells us. But a story is much more powerful. Give names, give faces to those numbers, and then we have a story. Many of us heard about the tragic passing of basketball star Kobe Bryant the other day. Sad, tragic, and his daughter, of course. And 7 other people in a helicopter, which most of us didn't know. We didn't know their names. We didn't see their faces. And so, circursely, in passing, we mourned them. Oh, that's too bad. But as far as the face, the star, the beloved man and his daughter, this cute little child, this man who was my same age, with a daughter the same age of my daughter, gets you right there in the feels, doesn't it? Why? Because that's a story. So the news media is not in the business of reporting incidents, reporting just the news, if you will. They're giving you stories. And some of you have heard some sensational stories. I don't know how true those are. For what's going on in Shanghai right now, mostly business as usual. Chinese New Year, empty streets, people wearing masks. That's normal. What's happening in the rest of the world, I wonder, though? Because again, the numbers coming out of the US right now are the same as they were in Wuhan not very long ago. But I'm not hearing any stories over there. Let's give this 2 weeks, see what happens. Again, that's the incubation period. Stay safe, my friends. And if not, there's more to life than life. Thanks for watching. Now get out there and train.